Welcome to the Crackin Backs Podcast, where we empower you to reclaim your health and your life. Today, we're honored to have Sandi Krakowski with us. Sandi is a dynamic entrepreneur who built a $12 million empire from the ground up. And while navigating the challenges of motherhood and some personal adversity, she's here to share her transformative journey and insights on overcoming trauma.
All right. Well, Sandi Krakowski, it's a pleasure to actually have you on the show. I followed you for a while and I just love your energy. And so I'm excited to blow this. I already know from our pre-talk that this is going to be a high energy show that's going to be filled with a lot of knowledge, a lot of laughs. And just a side note, we are recording it. I am in Southern California, and so a lot of crap is happening right now all around us. The firestorm that's national news is going on right around us. And by the time the show comes off, we're going to have a different looking Southern California, because we're right in the middle of what's going on right now. And so I think by the time the show comes off, hopefully we have some information for people to try and rebuild their financial, their physical, their nutritional lives, where they can have some information that would be very valuable. So welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being on.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It's my honor.
Well, from a woman who's rebuilt herself, who's done everything, I want to actually start off with, especially with the ruin that we've got going on in my back door. People are going to be financially ruined. They're losing their businesses. They've lost their homes. There's no insurance to cover it. So people are going to they're going to look to FEMA. They're going to look to their insurance. There's not going to be anything there. So let's talk about responsibility. And a lot of people, sexist, they turn to the men and to help, and there's a lot of women out there that are going to have to get back on their feet. So I would rather, let's talk about the women. And you've made a career of helping women build their financial independence. So can you just share a little bit about where all this started from, and let's get a little background on who you are and all that?
First, respectfully, Terry, I'm going to correct you.
Okay, perfect.
In the 18 companies that I've built, they have never been devoted to only women. We have a client base currently of 2.7 million people, and 42% of those are men. And so I am a woman who believes that men do usually stand up first. They are wired with provider and protector. And when a woman takes that away from him, you're actually doing him a disservice. Now, women also need to be able to think quick on their feet. The Bible does not teach in Proverbs 31 that the woman is a weak imbecile. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't know how to balance her own checkbook, and she doesn't know what to do in dire straits. No way. This woman's selling real estate. She's having babies. She's growing a garden. Her husband does not speak ill of her because of her ability and competency. And, having been someone who was given a year to live more than once, who's made 9 figures in business, in my history of business, who's lost millions, I can say that there's one thing that not a fire, not an illness, not a tornado, and not even a devastating 2-year-long multi-million-dollar divorce can take away from you, and that is your own brain and your own spirit. And that is the one thing that AI can't replicate, and that is the one thing that I believe that when you're in business, that is your greatest strength. Sure, you can outmarket and outserve your competitor, but depending on how good you are with uncertainty and how you handle things, whether or not you have resiliency or you flake whenever there's a problem that doesn't go your way, that is going to determine your capacity to get back up. I've always liked to say that the champion is not the one who always wins, but the champion is the one who falls on their ass and knows how to get back up and does it. So these are going to be very devastating situations. I don't have any capacity to even comprehend what it would be like. Certainly the area where it's happening, you will have people who have far more resources, far more back power, maybe more wealth to be able to restore and redo things, multiple streams of income, etc. But at the end of the day, humanity is humanity. And I wouldn't wish this on anyone. And I think just like what happened in North Carolina, this is an opportunity for the American people to support and encourage and serve each other, because my freedom came from the discipline of not depending on the federal government for what I needed in my crisis, but to have a support system around me and to know how to get those resources when I needed them without waiting for someone to bring them to me. Now, do I believe that the people in California deserve everything the government can offer? You better believe it, far more than Ukraine. But I will tell you that that may not happen in the time frame that you need it. And that's when we all pull together. I don't care what you make. I don't care what your gender. I don't care, what your skin color. This is when we need each other. And so that's what I've learned through difficult things.
Sandi, you made a really good point that about the winners and the losers and who you want to identify with as in a leadership capacity. It was fascinating to experience that, where I was graced by the opportunity to be with a World Series winning baseball team, the Florida Marlins, back when I started, and got caught up in all this energy of winning. And you think everybody's a leader, and then I had the unfortunate experience of being working for the Miami Dolphins when they went 1 win, 15 losses, and what we saw were the people you thought were leaders crumbling, and the ones that were the rock stars were the guys who started every game at 100%, and didn't get phased. They had short memories, and
that's it.
I really think that what you said just a moment ago is even more important than you alluded to, is look to a losing team to see where the leadership is, and then model that. So, and with that, my question for you is the anxiety that is expressed in people that are experiencing a lot of pressure. What do you suggest, and what do you do for yourself? Because anxiety is always around. It's how you perceive it. So give us some of your thoughts about how to alleviate those concerns and build more confidence.
As someone who experienced horrific trauma as a child, I dealt with anxiety the majority of my life until I did a lot of EMDR and parts work in the last 5 years. And so I battled chronic PTSD most of my life. Went on to build 8 companies because, of course, entrepreneurship is where those of us who've been traumatized and don't want to sleep go and make millions of dollars. But the anxiety of uncertainty, I think, needs to come to grips with the awareness that very few things in life are certain. And so I often find that when there is distress about uncertainty or things that we can't control, I think our expectation is what creates the anxiety, because when we realize we really don't have control over very many things, but we do have control on how we perceive and what we're going to do next. And something I have in my gym, and I've never met him, but man, it would be an honor to. Jocko says discipline is freedom. I have a big 8-foot sign in my home gym that says discipline is freedom. And people kind of equate discipline like people like Goggins. You know what I mean? I can't remember his first name. Like that would be David Goggins would be your definition of discipline. No, David Goggins would be your definition of insane discipline. That's Navy SEAL discipline. I'm talking the discipline that the average person must have to get your ass out of bed in the morning when you don't feel like it, to get into the gym even when you're not motivated, to examine your finances even though it's devastating and you've made a ton of mistakes. And when they gave me a year to live for the first time, I felt completely helpless because I had tried everything that I thought could be done. I had tried every pharmaceutical, natural, allopathic, homeopathic, herbalist, whatever approach was. But it wasn't until someone came into my life and gave me information that I did not know. And now all of a sudden, the whole perspective changed. all the anxiety about all of this and all of this that I had done and what else can I do dissipated in all that I could do, because I simply lacked the knowledge of what was still available in the midst of my anxiety. I faced the same kind of thing in the middle of a devastating divorce. It took 2 years to go through that grueling divorce because I had built so many companies and he thought I had offshore accounts and blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And yet at the end, I knew that I was blameless, not sinless, but I knew that my finances were in order, that I had not lied about anything, that if I was going to have to pay a settlement, I would pay that settlement. But the anxiety started to come. Did I hire the right people? Are the right people working with me? Am I going to be heard? Am I going to be protected? And I learned through that. Mind you, I was given a year to live in the middle of my divorce. My greatest strength comes from my relationship with Jesus Christ. I have a very intimate walk with God, and I do not have a relationship with religion. That's a very big difference. And my understanding that he would be with me, but I have the responsibility to seek him out, that he would walk with me and help me, but I have the responsibility to walk out what he's sharing with me, helped me to fire the wrong people, hire the right people, speak when I was terrified to open my voice. Like here I was in a courtroom running multi-million-dollar companies, but terrified to speak to a judge. Why would I be terrified to speak to a judge? Because I'd never stood in front of one before. I mean, in my brain, the only judges I knew were coming through my television. Like, you don't usually go in front of a judge when you've done everything good. Like,
right.
But, I also learned that the judge that got assigned on our case had a high level of integrity, and he had the ability to read somebody. And I will say that was a small price to pay for the freedom that I received, because marrying the wrong person could kill you. And it almost did. And yet the anxiety of going through it every day, people would be like, don't stress out. And it's like, you don't stress out. I wasn't working out at that time. I was on 140 milligrams of OxyContin, 90 milligrams of prednisone a day, on Remicade infusions every 4 weeks, trying to save my life. 75% of my digestive tract was hemorrhaging, and I'm going through a divorce. You talk about anxiety. And yet, I look back and I think to myself, how the heck did I do that? I do know that I dissociated probably through a lot of it, which made it worse. And I didn't address a lot of the things that I thought were super important, but I would later learn weren't. So dissociation was the negative. I later would learn as I integrated a lot of my trauma, and I don't battle PTSD anymore. I went through 5 years of extensive therapy and EMDR and multiple different things to reintegrate that part of my brain that had caused so much distress and so much distortion. But I also learned that during that situation, because I was so sick, I only started working 5 hours a week because I didn't have any left. I didn't have any bandwidth left. I had a great team, but I had no bandwidth left. And I realized how very little was critically important during that critically important time in my life.
A lot of people ask, what keeps us going during these long recording sessions? And the truth, it's all about the coffee. Stark roast to be exact. Seriously, this stuff is the perfect fuel to get us through every episode. And it's bold, it's smooth, and it's exactly what we need, whether we're cracking jokes or diving deep with a guest. Stark roast keeps me sharp, keeps me focused. It's the fuel behind every great conversation that we have here. Whether it's early in the morning or late at night, Stark roast is there to keep us energized and ready to roll. So if you're a coffee lover like us, or just need that little extra boost to get you through the day, we highly recommend Stark Roast. It's the good stuff. Thanks for Stark Roast for sponsoring this episode, and click on the link below in the description to buy some of your own. It's the real deal. Now let's get back into it. Sandi, let me ask you two questions for the listening audience. You had mentioned EMDR twice, and I would like you to elaborate on that.
Yeah.
What that is, because a lot of people don't know. In fact, I just recently, in the last couple of years, found out what EMDR is. Mm-hmm. And also, I would love to know what you were actually sick with.
Crohn's disease and rheumatoid arthritis. And thrombocytopenia. And multiple different autoimmune conditions that are no longer seen in my blood.
Okay, EMDR, and I want to know
how. And yesterday in the gym, I lifted 3 times my body weight. Went from a walker to this.
Great.
So EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. Have you ever seen anybody who's in a traumatic event, say a car accident, and they're sitting by the side of the road and they're going, like they just keep looking back and forth and back and forth. It's an interesting method that the brain uses to try to grasp reality. Now, it is of the grace of God that we don't have the capacity to process everything instantaneously, or we would die. We would literally die as a human race if we had to deal with traumatic events immediately. And so the brain compartmentalizes parts of these memories. My first one that happened when I was a very little girl. My mother was a psychopathic pedophile and stole my childhood from me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And again, I would later experience a gang rape when I was 18. And the reason that I can speak about it so calmly now is because eye movement reprocessing, EMDR, desensitization reprocessing, you work with a therapist who helps you to be able to process to completion the memory. The problem happens where I had multiple traumatic events and there were parts of my brain that had fractured. It is a miracle I did not have multiple personality disorder. Mm-hmm. It is a miracle. Because what happened to me would typically, that what would happen. But when the brain fractures, it stays in a hypervigilant loop. This is why vets, they come back from war, and as soon as anything in their senses, their body, even when they're asleep, thinks something's happening similar, the brain starts processing again like it is happening. Their physiology immediately goes into a state like it is happening. And you can't talk them out of it because it is happening in the unconscious mind. 90% of what we process all day is in the unconscious mind. And so I had multiple parts of my brain that were constantly in hypervigilance, which totally fed into the meta-inflammation that was killing me. Because hypervigilance will give you inflammation like cardiac arrest. It will definitely raise, my C-reactive proteins were so off the chart every time I went into the doctor or hospital for Crohn's disease, they thought I was having a heart attack. And when you do the eye movement, a psychotherapist helps you to process a memory. So let's say, Spencer, we're going to process one part of the gang rape I experienced that I can't remember. And that is not what EMDR is for, because the brain has a selective capacity to block out until you are ready. It is an incredibly it is so remarkable what the brain will do. But let's say there's one part that every time I think of it, I start shaking or like I can't talk about it. It gets too much and I start, I want to change the subject and I go into hysterical laughter and I want to think about something else. That is what a therapist will help you to do. All of those are dissociative methods, by the way. That's the unconscious mind saying, stay away from there. So what a therapist helps you do is process that memory while your eyes are watching a light go back and forth over the course of like a minute. It's not for long. You're not going to get stuck because the only place that trauma is in memory. I can tell you about it, but you can't live it because it's in the past. But in the unconscious mind, it was still very present. There were part of my brain that was still 4, that was still 8, that was still processing certain emotions like I was 14, because that's when the trauma happened. And when you process it with the eye movement and a licensed therapist who can help you to know what to process, when to stop, when to take a breather, when to ground yourself and help yourself realize you're not in the memory, the brain does a remarkable thing. So the eye movement desensitizes. I could go through a memory and not have a physiological response. Then, are you ready for this? It's mind-boggling. The brain begins to integrate not only that memory, but the residue of that memory in many other areas of your life. And as that integration happens, I mean, it's a grueling work doing this and facing memories that we have spent the majority of our life not wanting to talk about, not wanting to remember, not wanting to act like it ever happened, not wanting anybody to bring up. And now you're asking me to face it. And yet when you face it in that desensitized way, oftentimes you find a part of yourself that is so remarkably powerful to have lived through that memory, that is so remarkably wise. I was a little girl who could talk predators out of their demise to keep myself alive. I was a little girl that could talk a group of men in a gang rape out of killing me. I didn't remember that until I started to do a lot of EMDR. And then when the reprocessing happens, gosh, your brain starts to act like you took a limitless pill. Because now you have access to your brain and the rest of you is not exhausted all the time. My inflammatory markers would start to go down. I would start to sense a trigger happening, but I would have tools to know how to reassure myself that this is not that. And I know how to handle this. And my doctor was Dr. Michaela Sarno, who is in Costa Mesa. And such a brilliant woman because, you know, being in charge of a multi-million-dollar corporation and millions of people online, confidentiality was of the utmost importance. My story was mine to tell and no one else's. And I needed that, and I needed somebody who didn't have such a big ego that they wanted to be responsible for healing me so they could tell Sandi's story and use her as a little, you know, pin up on their board of success stories. That is so appalling when people do that. The very fact that she was able to win trust with me, which took a while. Took about 6 months till she could win the trust with constantly working through and talking and opening up and allowing me to ask anything. This is not a therapy you walk in on a Saturday and walk out that night and you're fine. Because it takes an enormous amount of trust for the unconscious mind to drop its guard and for you to able to reassure your mind that I'm not going to let you get in that situation again. It often felt like at a certain point, like I was reparenting a younger part of myself. And then integration happens when you realize, and all those parts are me. They're not separate personalities. They're just memories that fractured off into if you would, a hidden box and didn't want to talk about it. But my brain was trying to process it all day long, trying to protect me and keep me safe. And so it was life-changing. Like people said to me, your eye color changed, Sandi. You talk differently. My children were like, I mean, you've always been our hero, but you have a level of calm now with your intensity that is unbelievable. Like they were accustomed to the badass mommy. But the calmness that came from really realizing who God made me to be and who I was and how remarkable it was that I had survived that.
Let's talk pasta, oats, grains, and more. I'm gluten-free, and this one item I can have without any consequences. Since we always talk about fueling our bodies the right way, that's where Guardian Grains comes in. No kidding. Their products are a massive shift towards healthy eating. Guardian Grains is all about healthy, sustainable grains that not only taste great, but are great for you and the planet. Whether it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, Guardian Grains has you covered with all kinds of nutrition that keep you going strong. Perfect for long days of just living life. Plus, knowing it's sustainably grown, that's a win-win. Sincere appreciation goes to the Guardian Grains for sponsorship of this episode and for making it easy to stay healthy while supporting sustainable farming. Click the link below the description to buy some of your own. You'll taste the difference.
So, Sandi, before all the resolution of the EMDR and all that work, you already had successful companies. And then what did you do to create those, to have that esteem and that intention prior to and then after the resolve of a lot of the past trauma? What was the difference?
It was an interesting process, even owning that, if you will. Mm-hmm. So I had been a multimillionaire for more than 12 years before I ever told anybody I was a millionaire. When I made my first million, I was in a very religious church, and I was terrified to tell anybody I was a millionaire because every Sunday from the pulpit, there were messages about how God doesn't like money and money is evil. And, here I was just on my computer, homeschooling my children, minding my business. And it was like, I just made $50,000 and I barely have a high school education. And then I made 100,000, and then I made 300,000, and then I made $1 million. I remember when I told my ex-husband I made my first million, he asked me if it was legal, because that's the typical response from someone who barely makes it through high school and is with someone who has multiple degrees. And you go and make $1 million by the middle of your second year in business, and you've never been in business before.
So what were those characteristics or those attributes that you already possessed that allowed you to get to that point? Because some of our listeners are super intrigued and want to know.
Well, I was the little girl who came home from school and read the World Book Encyclopedia. No kidding. I was the little girl who came home from school and was reading, the world books and studying everything I could. And I pretty much created a world of knowledge and wisdom outside of the circumstance I was living in. And little did I know that God was wiring all that together for my future. The very capacity that I had for watching my predators and knowing exactly where they were, what they were doing, and how to get myself safe caused my brain to identify trends and patterns at a level that was like, whoa, did somebody teach you to do that? I remember when a multi-billionaire copywriter said to me, you have a skill that you can't teach. That was one of them. I had the ability, I remember when I first created my first website, which looks atrocious when you look on archive.org, and I would study websites. And I would study the patterns that were between multiple different industries and multiple different headlines. There must be something similar here. Okay, they're all doing this. And I just spent hours and hours. I was not sleeping at the time. Studying, watching people speak, turning off the voice and watching what they were doing with their body language. And when I started my first kitchenware store, my motto was, if it's not in my kitchen, it's not in my store. Because that was the integrity I operated in. I was going to sell you something that I thought was crap. To this day, I won't. If I can't get behind it, why would I sell it to you? There's so many ways to make money. Why would I be a fraud like that? And I would later discover that my ability to do trends and patterns would pay me an enormous amount of money in marketing. And I had an innate ability to write copy, which is the words that sell, as a direct response marketing copywriter that would cause people to take the direct response that I wanted, whether it was through a radio infomercial, through a Facebook ad. Back then it was Overture before Google even. I remember the day Google opened and I started my account. I still have that account, by the way. Whenever, I haven't used Google Ads in a bit, but the last time I did, I remember one of the tech support said to me, you have a remnant account. And I was like, I have a what? And they're like, You were around when Google first opened their advertising. I don't even know if that is the case anymore since there's Alphabet, but I studied ads. Ads ran almost like the stock market back then, because like you would say, I'm going to pay 10 cents a click. And there would be like 10 other companies that were paying 10 cents a click. And then you'd say, I want to pay 17 cents a click. And then somebody else paid 32 cents a click. I literally sat in front of my computer all the time, managing budgets, watching what worked, what didn't work. I don't know why I wasn't afraid of loss. Maybe because what did I have to lose? I mean, I just really had no idea that I was going to make $1 million. I hadn't made a vision board. I didn't ask God to make me a millionaire. None of that stuff. I just wanted to give it my best and make enough money to get my own kitchenware for free. That was my motive. And by the second year, we made $1 million. By the third year, I had made over $4 million and went on and built multiple other companies after that. I think my ability to get back up quickly, my resiliency is what kept me going. Since the day that I made my first $1 million, my companies I've never made personally less than $1 million a year. And I went from working 100 and something hours a week down to now I work about 5 or 10 hours. I'm also building another company. And so I'm starting to spend a lot of time researching and stuff for that company. I currently still have a company that runs, but I pretty much retired 5 years ago, and I have an exceptional team that allows me to work 5 hours a week and they do the rest. But yeah, I think stick-to-itiveness, being okay with uncertainty, an insatiable hunger to learn and grow and try to find a solution rather than a problem.
If you were to talk to someone that, a woman preferably in this arena, to start out, what would you tell her to start out with? And, mentally, should they be thinking or doing?
Well, from 2008 to 2020, we had a business academy. And in that business academy is over 2,200 hours of me teaching. And we put 1.8 million people through that business academy. So what I told people was initially when they're like, I want to make money. How do I make money quickly? How do I get out of debt quickly? And I'm like, no, your focus is all wrong. Lean into the marketplace and listen to what they're saying. Is there something you can do that would solve that problem? Can you outservice and outmarket somebody? Do you see a problem that you believe you are capable of fixing? Do you see something that the marketplace is demanding already? And you can fill that need. That is what a good business is built around. A good business is not usually something you pull out of thin air and try to figure out if it works. That's where the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos, they do that kind of stuff. Us average gals like myself, we find something that's exceptional, but then we find out where it's broken. That's exactly what I'm doing right now with my telehealth company that will open this spring. I am finding all the structural breaks, the psychological breaks, the integral breaks. There's no integrity in the medical system. There just isn't. I believe that telehealth and AI is going to give a cease and desist to all these doctors who don't deserve to practice, because no longer are they going to be tolerated. And I'm not out there trying to convince people that they should use telehealth for bioidentical hormones for women, testosterone replacement for men, and injectable peptides for both, because that need's already there. Plus, 8 years ago, how did I heal my body and I'm no longer given a year to live? It was bioidentical hormones and peptide therapy. And so what I do have in my favor this time that I didn't with other companies when I was first starting is I have a client base of over 2 million people that are over the age of 40. So because of that, it will be very easy to grow. But when you don't have a client base, you only have one choice. You have to market, period. You're not waiting for an opportunity. You're not waiting for someone to give you a big break. I've never had one. You're not like people say all the time, well, I never got an opportunity. You're lucky. I'm like, no. Opportunity is equal. Outcome is not. You're talking to a girl who barely made it through high school, was given a year to live, was gang raped when she was 18, a pedophile stole her childhood, and I married a narcissist, of course, because that's all that I knew. Tell me what opportunity that was.
Mm-hmm.
That was an opportunity to become a heroin addict, kill myself, or end up in jail, statistically. But I decided to go counterculture to what I may have been statistically looked at like I would become, and to become who God made me to be. And this one thing I discovered when I came to know Jesus at 12 is he gave me enormous courage to do things I don't know how to do and to try to figure them out.
Sandi, knowing that you're not a physician or anything, but you speak very highly about health and wellness for the menopausal or postmenopausal woman that may be in the workplace or in a relationship. Could you lend some advice that you've experienced that worked best for you?
Sure. And the reason why we're going to serve men and women is because it would be tragic to help a woman get on bioidentical hormones, get her sex drive back, get her into the gym, feeling great about herself, and her poor husband's over there going, what just happened to my woman? I would like both of them to be teenagers again in their 50s. So what happened to me, because of that trauma, I was predisposed. First of all, when a woman is sexually violated, she is already predisposed to go into menopause early. When she has an abortion and multiple miscarriages, the gang rape, that was another thing I had to heal from, was an abortion not only that I almost died from, but that I wanted to die because I had done that, and walking through that shame and all of that. So here I was, statistically wired to go through menopause early. And after my last baby and 4 miscarriages, they almost lost me. And I had a hysterectomy at 31 years old. No one ever put me on hormones.
Ugh.
Now, when a woman loses her estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, you will age quickly. Your inflammation will go off the charts. Now you have a risk of colon cancer. Your heart is advancing quickly into deterioration. You are not only losing 1 to 2% of your bone loss every year, you're lucky if you didn't lose 15 to 20% of it. When I met a doctor at 53 years old, my bone density looked like I was 70. My lab said my estrogen level was 5. A healthy postmenopausal woman on bioidentical hormones, it would be between 80 and 100. That's when you feel like you can think again and you can sleep again and you're not bitching at everybody and everything else. Then what happened was she introduced me to injectable peptides, back when peptides weren't even sexy. Everybody thinks peptides means GLP-1s. No, there's hundreds of peptides. And the anti-inflammatory peptides and the bioidentical hormones and the will to live, I created my own protocol, weaned off of all the opiates without any side effects, weaned off of all the prednisone, walked back into the gym after 30 years, went from competing in bodybuilding in my 20s to not being in the gym for 30 years, walked back into the gym with a serious case of sarcoobesity, which means I was 185 pounds and my muscle and bone were less than the fat, and started from ground zero. And so for me, I do a lot of extensive research on these to be able to speak appropriately. I also have great relationships with multiple doctors. I've also taken many certification classes. I will obviously not be consulting anybody. I will be the CEO and the owner and the founder. I will have the best medical directors that the United States has to offer, the best nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. But the sad thing that happened was women were taken off all their hormones by a bogus press release that happened in 2002 by the World Health Initiative. And that was later retracted, but women didn't get that message. Now, the average doctor, including an OBGYN, has less than an hour or 2 of training on menopause. Once you lose your eggs, you're of no use to the OBGYN world. You don't make them much money. Now you're of use to the cardiologist. Now you're of use to the gastroenterologist. Now you're of use to the bone people. But because you don't have any eggs, you're not going to make us any more money in OBGYN. So they have very little knowledge on hormones. And I began to educate myself to try to figure out, why do I feel so much better? Why did my skin change? Why am I back in the gym? How did all this happen? and began to talk about it and found women were just as frustrated as I was, and men, because the levels of testosterone have been lowered so that, you see, 94% of Americans right now in 2025 have metabolic dysfunction. Metabolic dysfunction will kill you. It is the primary link behind Alzheimer's, dementia, heart disease, colon cancer, breast cancer. Metabolic dysfunction is what causes hormone-positive cancers, not hormones. It's because you have such severe metabolic dysfunction that you cannot process these hormones properly. And so, I just started talking to people about it. I got severe metabolic dysfunction after 8 years of being on Remicade. And 2 years ago, I had to wean myself off of Remicade and heal metabolic dysfunction. Thank God for peptides. I was able to rebuild my mitochondria, and here I am.
That's great. I mean, we've interviewed guests that specialize in, Terry, what was the name of the gynecologist out in California?
Oh, Dr. C.
Yeah, Dr. Sernayan. She believes the same way you do. And then a recent article, gosh, Sandi, you brought up a really important point. A recent article came out in, I think, Wall Street Journal that talked about how the old days, well, which weren't that old, when you get a hysterectomy, they would take everything out and women wouldn't ask. And those ovaries, like you
and I still had my ovaries, but they wanted to put me on Premarin. I am not a horse.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't want horse estrogen. I want bioidentical hormones that are bioavailable. If any woman is reading this book, or a man who hopes to understand his wife, I'm listening to this better, estrogen matters is ground zero to understand how anti-inflammatory estrogen is, how protective it is, why it's important to have your levels regularly checked. Why do I have a part-time job of eating 135 grams of protein a day? That's what it feels like, a part-time job. Because if I want to keep my bones and my muscle, they need protein. Why do I lift weights? Well, first of all, it keeps me off the streets and out of prison. But that's a joke, kind of. I love lifting weights, but I lift weights because there is no other exercise that increases your bone density. Resistance strength training is the only thing that increases your bone density. Why am I obsessed about my sleep? Because my deep sleep is what makes my body repair. Prior to doing EMDR, I could not get a half hour of REM to save my life. I now get between 2 and 3 hours of REM. Last week I had one night that I did 4 hours of REM, and I was like looking at my ring, and I was like, geez, that brain was busy. That's when you process all those memories, is your REM. And your deep sleep is when your body is able to repair, and it produces all those lovely hormones that make you feel amazing, and you don't behave like a postmenopausal woman that needs to get off of Facebook and take some estrogen. Or a postmenopausal man, respectfully, right, who needs to get off of other sites and go find his goals again and get a T-shot or maybe some oral testosterone or whatever and feel like himself again. Because men are not made to live without a drive to do something and build solutions and protect and provide. And women were not made to sit around in front of the current soap opera called Facebook and read it all day.
Right.
And so
what actually is your daily nutritional approach like? What you said, you mentioned how much protein, but can you give like a typical day so some of our listeners might be able to?
Sure. Well, first of all, I buy as little as I can from the store. I have a half a cow that's grass-fed finished in my freezer for just me. I literally ate a quarter of a cow last year. And I weigh 128. And then I buy local, in Texas, it's amazing. I can buy my turkey and my chicken from local farmers. I have Wild Alaska that sends me all the best fish. I grow all my own organic veggies and berries and herbs. So in my backyard, I've got all my veggies and berries and herbs growing. whatever I might not be growing that I want, I get from a farmer's market. If I eat bread or whatever, it's usually the stuff that I make, or it's high protein bread. I do not count carbs. I'm not macro obsessed anymore. I lived that life for way too long. But I'm hyper focused on protein and a gallon of water a day. Protein and making sure I got my amino acids, my LMNT electrolytes, making sure I'm getting good sleep, keeping morons far away, everything to keep yourself strong and resilient. And my current cardiovascular age on my tests is 48, and my metabolic age is 45. And I'll be 61 in 2 months.
Bravo. You mentioned about peptides, because we had somebody on our podcast that was an expert in peptides. Do you mind sharing what your favorite peptides are?
Sure. I've been taking CJC 1295 and ipamorelin, TB 500, BPC 157, MOT SC periodically for the mitochondria in a very small microdose. I was taking microdoses of HGH for about 4 or 5 years, and I don't use a GLP-1 for weight loss, but I highly recommend it for people who have metabolic dysfunction. But retatrutide, I actually just recently in the last 2 weeks started microdosing it for inflammation and replaced the HGH, trying out retatrutide, which is a new GLP-1 that also has anabolic type effects, meaning that it's going to spare your muscle. Personally, I don't think people have excessive muscle loss if you're eating right. If you're taking a GLP-1 and your appetite's been cut so bad that you can't eat, you need to lower your dose, not complain that you can't eat. You know what I mean? If you eat like crap, you're going to feel like crap. So I had a torn meniscus, for example, tore 75% of my meniscus in one of my knees. The surgeon said, there's nothing you can do. You're going to have to get surgery. I said, thank you very much. I'll see you in 90 days if that's the case. I started taking TB 500, extra doses of HGH. I usually use testosterone cream, which is common for a menopausal woman, postmenopause. But I used injectable testosterone for 2 months because that helps you grow tissue. And the MRI showed that I grew new cartilage. Just call me Wolverine-ness. And so I love glutathione, which is not necessarily a peptide. I love NAD. And whenever something's off, I know some great people who help me to find out what might work. And I don't tolerate feeling off for very long.
Have you ever done a GI mapping? You talked about alluded to microbiome and like a stool sample. Have you done any? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Prior to going on Remicade, they were going to give me a what is it called? It is a stool transfusion, where basically it's one of those things. There's various hospitals that do that, where they take. I actually had a donor. It was one of my friend's sons who had never been vaccinated, and he had never been sick. He was 15, and they were going to take fecal transplant and take that, and then they clean it all out and put all the microbiome in your gut. But I went on Remicade. That's what stopped all the bleeding. And then eventually I had to get off Remicade because Remicade is a very strong drug. And that's what really facilitated getting into metabolic dysfunction. And so, my weight all my adult life is between 125 and 135. And I was 180 pounds while on Remicade.
Wow.
And 185 pounds when I was on prednisone and opiates. So, yeah, it goes to show you, inflammation is the killer. And so many women are so afraid of estrogen, yet they're drinking alcohol. They're not sleeping. They're stressed out to the max. They're not exercising. They're not eating right. And they're terrified of estrogen. That metabolic dysfunction is far more dangerous.
Yeah. The gynecologist that was on our podcast shared a really interesting point of view. You might want to look at, the research that was done that determined that estrogen would cause cancer was done with a not a biologically
No, it's not a bioidentical hormone. They also didn't publish that it was actually progestins that were off the chart. And the progestins are far more cancer inducing than estrogen ever will be. But if you have metabolic dysfunction and then you have estrogen dominance and then you take progestins, which is so wild to me because so many women buy them at health food stores. They're not regulated. They're not tested. They haven't had the proteins taken out of the soy or the yam for the estrogen. I mean, shoot, there's essential oil companies selling progesterone like it's, like it's vitamin C. And yet the progestins are the ones that can be very problematic to you if you have metabolic dysfunction. And so, but it made a sensational headline that terrified millions of women. And they stopped taking estrogen. Well, a terrified woman is very easy to control. And she's very easy to talk into taking statins. She's very easy to talk into following a low-fat diet that will later lead her to heart disease. She's very easy to talk into anything because she's terrified.
Desperate.
And so I'm on a mission to help women advocate for themselves and to ask the right questions and to stop acting. I have women all the time who say, well, I don't know what doctor to trust. And I said, well, first of all, why are you looking for a doctor to trust? The first person you have to trust is yourself. That's where you have to do the research. You have to know what you're asking for. You have to let them know when you feel off. They're not God. You have to let them know when the hormones are making you break out, or you're all of a sudden you're waking up, or you're getting a headache. And then when you find and you start interviewing doctors, that's what you're doing. You're interviewing to see if they deserve to work with you and advocate with you for your best outcome. Then you'll know how to fire them. Why? Because you trust yourself. That's how you attract doctors that you trust, because you trust yourself first, rather than, a lot of times when women, biologically, we look for someone to rescue us. And yet I can get better help from people. Part of my healing was learning how to ask for help. The power of feminine essence is being willing to receive and be able to ask for help. And yet I needed to know who to ask for help from. I needed to know who to ignore. And when to ask more questions, and then when to fire their ass because they're not working for me. So,
hey, Sandi, you brought up a lot, and you're good at clearing the mud as far as, like I say, because there's so much chaos out there, and there's so much a mess, and people are confused and all that. I want to go back to bioidentical hormones. A lot of people don't understand that, and they hear from this thing and this thing. You've lived it, you own it, and now you're going to create a company. Can you just clear some mud about what bioidentical hormones are? A patch, an injection, anything like that for the person?
Absolutely. So the hormones that many of the women were taking for many, many years were synthetic hormones. And they were originated from horse sources and multiple other different things. They put me on Premarin when I had a hysterectomy, and I got over 20 lesions, 20 cysts in my breast within a couple weeks. So of course he said, you can't take HRT. You're not a candidate for HRT. Well, that's synthetic hormones. Synthetic hormones look at your biochemistry, and without a filter, it's like they look at your biochemistry and go, what the fuck? You're like, you're not a horse. What am I supposed to do? Now, bioidentical hormones are made for a woman, in estrogen and progesterone are made from soy and yam. However, they do not have the allergens in them anymore. What you find on your health food store, first of all, there's no such thing as a non-genetically modified soy in America. I don't care if you got it in your health food store, and I don't care if the label said organic. You have genetically modified soy and yam, and you have a protein that a lot of people can't handle, that soy protein. Where with bioidentical hormones, they take the soy and the yam and they process it. They remove the proteins. It is turned into, yes, a synthetic substance, but it is bioidentical to a woman's estrogen and progesterone. Therefore, the bioavailability is more readily usable. Now, it can come in a gel, it can come in a compounded cream, it can come in a patch, it can come in a tablet, and it can come in an injection. You have to be careful with the tablets and injections because they're going to process through the liver. And men have been blessed to have a new medication out for testosterone called Kysotrex, which processes through the lymphatic system, which is fantastic for men because oral testosterone goes right through that liver again. And I'm hoping that the same kind of biochemistry will bring an oral estrogen to women as well that processes through the lymphatic system. The goal is to keep consistent doses. And the more, like, so for example, I was on a certain dose of gel from the time I was 53 till I was 60 a couple months ago. And then all of a sudden I started getting a little off. Like my memory was off again. I'm starting getting warm in the middle of the night, having some hot flashes and like, what is going on? And so we switched me to a patch because by the time you're taking a couple pumps of a cream, you're already reached the lid of how much you're probably going to absorb. I got put on a patch, symptoms dissipated in 2 days.
Wow.
And now that's not going to happen for a woman coming in cold, but my body already knew what to do with bioidentical hormones. It was already giving symptoms that it's dropping, and so it could adapt quickly. For the average woman, it can take 30 to 60 days. A lot of women feel relief. I mean, for me, I felt like my brain woke up. I remember calling my doctor going, I have a sex drive again. She goes, hallelujah. And I mean, I literally felt like I was 40 again and felt fantastic. The joint pain started going down. I had a desire to start walking. Before I could hardly walk around my block without pain. And, you know, I had calmness. And then testosterone cream, that's bioidentical as well. Obviously, a woman will take about 1/10 of what a man does. It just depends on where your levels are. Some women feel good at 80. Some women feel good at 120. I tend to feel good at about 100, 120. When they put me on testosterone injections, it went higher than that. Let me just say I have enormous respect for men. I felt like I was a teenage boy. That's all I'm going to say. I was just like, why is my brain thinking about sex 24 hours a day? I was like, okay, how much longer do I have to take this? I'm getting off the dating apps and I'm not talking to anybody until I'm done. But some women, they need 200-300 until they feel better. What a lot of women don't realize is, you know how we juggle career and kids and cooking and laundry and all that? That's because when you're younger, your testosterone is 3 times higher than your estrogen. But testosterone doesn't go like this for a woman. It starts to go like this. That's why many women understand they're in perimenopause when all of a sudden everything bugs them. And I can't sleep. And why am I doing everything? The estrogen, as soon as the eggs, it starts to decline more aggressively. But it's amazing what it does to protect your brain. For me, it was a part of putting my autoimmune conditions in remission. And it was a part of really giving me my life back and giving me the capacity to push forward and find how to heal from these diseases. Because when you feel like crap, you only have so much of a capacity. I mean, as soon as you hit a wall, you're just like, well, forget it. You know, where when you feel stronger and you're more resilient and your hormones are balanced, you're like, okay, that's a wall. We're going that way. No, we're not giving up. We're going that way. Hormones are amazing.
I got a question. Since you're a fixer and you've always studied everything, for the woman who's never done it in their 50s and 60s, who's cold, who's going, oh, my joints hurt. Oh, this is, and what would be a cookbook or to find someone to know what was the right dosage for them? Yeah. What would be a cookbook that people listening to the show can start today?
You mean a recipe?
A recipe. Yeah, you're right.
First of all, read this book.
Okay.
I also have a mentorship where I help women know what questions to ask their doctor, how to understand their symptoms, how to understand that if you have multiple diseases like I did, you need a hormone specialist. Okay. You also need to understand why your OBGYN may say you're normal. You need to understand why many of them haven't had the education. You need to understand that you don't ask your neurologist about your hormones. Sister, you don't ask your gastroenterologist. Okay, you had colon cancer, but we're not asking our gastroenterologist about our hormones. We're asking a hormone specialist who works with oncologists. And what happens is, for the majority of the time, telehealth is a beautiful place for this, because most women will put off their health ahead of every other member of the family. As soon as they have to work overtime, they cancel the appointment. As soon as there's too much traffic, mind you, their hormones are already down, so they have the capacity to push through. Like, I was like, forget it. Just forget it, and constantly rescheduling the appointment. Usually, if you're in your 50s, they're going to put you on hormones by your symptoms, and then they're going to take your labs. They're not necessarily going to take your labs and then take your hormones. The reason being is you're already giving the symptoms. It's already common. Some women go completely into perimenopause in their 30s and have not been educated that that can happen. And then you get your labs done about every 3 months. So you don't need to fear, oh my God, what's going to happen if everything gets out of whack and nobody knows and I wake up one day and have cancer? That's not going to happen if you take care of yourself. You get your labs regularly, you eat the clean diet, you move your body, you have a relationship with your practitioner to tell them how you feel. And then you really have to give it patience, and you have to believe that this kind of stuff can help. How do you help that buy-in? Like I said, by reading books, by listening to people like Dr. Mary Claire, who's really talked a lot about menopause, and following some menopause specialists on Instagram who talk about what do you really have to watch for. You know, I think culturally it's become offensive to say to a woman, these 40 pounds you're carrying around your waist, this high blood pressure, these high LDLs and HDLs are dangerous. That's going to get you breast cancer faster than estrogen. Women don't want to hear that. They already hate themselves and they're mad that they're out of shape and feel like crap. But that's a conversation that has to be had, because the estrogen is not the one to be scary of. The alcohol and the metabolic dysfunction is the one to be scared of. And then to do that, to not just have a need to talk about your symptoms, to not just constantly keep processing what all your symptoms are. I've worked with women like that. They just want to continue the dialogue. They're like, well, my doctor told me I shouldn't take them. And I'm like, do you feel like crap? Yeah. Did they say you have an existing condition that prevents you from taking them? No. Then fire them and find another doctor. Advocate for yourself. Did you have a doctor who says with the BRCA gene you shouldn't be taking them? Yeah. Well, then find somebody who understands what the BRCA gene is and that actually you can take transdermal estrogen. Yeah. Find someone who understands that specialty. When my digestive tract was hemorrhaging, okay, I wasn't consulting with an osteopathic doctor for my digestive tract. When my rheumatoid arthritis was off the wall, I was not calling, somebody who specializes in infectious diseases. I was with a rheumatologist. And so hormones are the connectors to all other organs functioning properly. And it's so funny how a small dose of a small level off can make your everything feel off. Yeah. And when it gets balanced, you really do not know how off you felt until you're balanced. That was my experience. Like, holy cow. I had no idea I was so sick, because we push through. Women, we're survivors. Like, we don't want to, we got to take care of the baby. And oh my God, now I got to make dinner. And nobody did the laundry. And my boss has a project. And we put ourselves last. And yet in order to do what we have to do, we have to realize it's not selfish to put yourself first. The greatest thing you can show your family is that you love yourself, and you love yourself enough to take care of yourself. Because if you don't take care of yourself now, you are going to be a very costly, difficult burden later in life. The greatest gift you can give your family is take care of yourself.
Love that.
Sandi, I think I'm absolutely certain what you had said is so remarkably important, is take care of yourself first. And a lot of women do believe that now because it's been said so many times.
Yeah.
But, the most important thing is, who do you trust and who can you go to? But people like yourself who've been through this, who've been, our podcast highlights some brilliant people that share, the avenue to take that completely bucks the system of what everybody's, what the masses are doing and, falling victim to. So thank you. We appreciate that. And I have a funny feeling our next little segment right now that we're going into to end our show is the rapid fire questions. I have 5 questions for you.
No, I love it. That's my favorite thing, is not knowing anything somebody's going to ask me and answering it. I love that. I do that with my stocks group. And it's like on Fridays, it's Ask Me Anything Friday. Monday through Friday, I'm teaching them private equity and money and stocks and investment. And on Fridays, it's like, pick my brain. I have no idea what you're going to ask.
Oh, perfect.
Well, I have a good feeling that you're going to be very quick on your feet. I couldn't wait for this segment because I go, she's going to rock this thing. All right, Sandi, we got 5 questions, starting with number 1. Are you ready for this?
Ready for what?
My next 5 questions.
I was born ready. Would you go?
Number 1, are there any food trends that you can't stand?
Carnivore.
All right. How come?
Because it masks the symptoms. People say, no, carnivore healed my Crohn's. Really? Then eat 3 donuts with me. No, I can't do that. I'll feel sick. I won't be able to go to the bathroom. My inflammatory markers will go up. I go, then honey, the carnivore abated your symptoms. It didn't heal anything.
Nice. Question number 2. What is one piece of advice that you've gotten that continues to guide you to this day?
Do not take advice from people who do not have the kind of life that you want.
Ooh, I love that.
Didn't I knew she'd be quick on her feet. Question number 3. If you were a Formula One race car, what team name would you be called?
Mighty Might. That's what my grandkids call me. Mighty Might.
Mighty Might?
Yeah, Meanie, you a Mighty Might.
I love it.
I love it.
That's great. Mighty Might.
Or Unicorn Speedway.
Yeah. All right.
Very good. Question number 4. What is your favorite get down and boogie music?
Country.
Really?
Yeah, give me some more
Texas,
Morgan Wallen or Cody Johnson. Heck yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, give me some Jelly Roll. Give me all of that. I'm digging Post Malone's country era. Yes.
There you go.
George Strait. Yeah. There we go. I grew up in the R&B capital in Detroit, but as soon as I came to Texas, man, I sold my Mercedes sports car, got me an HD 2500 Denali Ultimate, and turned on country.
I went to chiropractic college in Houston, and I hated country in the first year. Before the end of that first year, I had my radio station tuned in and everything.
I got my big truck, got my guns, and got my country.
There you go. Love it.
Question number 5, final question. Sandi, what would you love to be remembered for?
Helping people break out of their amnesia and remembering who they are.
Oh, that's great.
I literally that is my life goal, is to help people remember who they are.
I see that. Sandi, it's been a wonderful, over an hour, but it's been a wonderful
truly
program
been a blast.
with you. I love your energy, your enthusiasm for life. And I think you're going to really, you're going to really help a lot of people. Good for you.
Thank you. I hope so. I want to make a difference. I want to give people hope and help people realize that old age is not a disease.
I love that.
Thanks, Sandi.
Thank you, Sandi. Everything you said was just fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Crackin Backs Podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Crackin Backs Podcast. Catch new episodes every Monday. See you next time.